Sometimes the ones tasked with enforcing the law are the very ones who break it, and this is really a threat to the judiciary and societal equilibrium. But we've witnessed some female cops ignoring their duties and breaking the law. However, they didn't realize that cameras were watching them. Brace yourself for a riveting exploration into the dark underbelly of law enforcement as we expose what happens when female cops get caught breaking the law. Amanda Myers. On a chilly evening on February 5, 2020, Officer Katie and Patrolman Rankin received a call that would lead them to an intriguing car accident. The situation unfolded as they arrived at the scene and were greeted by a fellow officer named Amanda Myers. However, there was more to this tale than initially met the eye. Amanda wasted no time in engaging the officers, keen on expressing her side of the story. With conviction in her voice, she introduced herself as a police officer who also worked at a bar to supplement her income. But that was not the main point she wanted to convey. According to Amanda, it was Stanley McKee who was to blame for the collision. Painting a vivid picture, Amanda recounted the events leading up to the accident. As she began backing out of a parking space, Stanley appeared, pulling into the lot. In the blink of an eye, their worlds collided, with Stanley striking Amanda's car. The scene was set for a battle of perspectives. However, Stanley had his own version of the events, and it diverged greatly from Amanda's account. He claimed that he had already successfully maneuvered his vehicle out of the parking lot, coming to a complete stop due to the oncoming traffic. His story portrayed a responsible driver, careful not to cause any harm. According to Stanley, it was Amanda who, while attempting to reverse, struck the front end of his vehicle with the rear end of hers. The clash of metal echoed in his retelling, and the implications of such a collision hung heavy in the air. The plot thickened as Stanley continued his side of the tale. He recounted the aftermath of the impact, describing how Amanda emerged from her car and proposed a quick solution. "Just pay $50, she told him. But Stanley, aware of the true cost of a damaged headlight, urged Amanda to follow the proper protocol of exchanging information. It was a sensible suggestion, one that aimed to resolve the matter in a fair and lawful manner. However, Amanda did not take kindly to Stanley's proposal. The air grew tense as their disagreement escalated into a heated argument. Voices clashed and frustration permeated the atmosphere, leaving the officers with a perplexing puzzle to solve. It all started when Stanley, a concerned citizen with a keen eye, witnessed an alarming display of irresponsible behavior by a certain individual named Myers. Fearing for the safety of the community, Stanley wasted no time and dialed the emergency number, summoning the local police force to the scene. As the officers arrived, Stanley took it upon himself to inform them of his suspicion that Myers was under the influence, a serious matter that could not be ignored. To Stanley's relief, the police officers quickly noticed the signs that corroborated his claim. Myers, stumbling over her words and struggling to maintain her balance, showed clear indications of impaired judgment. Officer Rankin, concerned for Myers' well-being and the potential consequences she might face, attempted to reason with her. But Myers, far from appreciating Officer Rankin's intervention, responded with defiance. She adamantly declared her ability to fight any charges that might come her way, dismissing the gravity of her actions. With an air of misplaced confidence, Myers boasted about her knowledge of the police procedure, despite her repeated failures to recall even the most basic aspects of it. As if her false bravado wasn't enough, Myers resorted to name-dropping, attempting to impress the police officers by mentioning the name of Joseph O'Malley, a supposed prosecutor. However, little did she know that O'Malley himself had fallen into disrepute, having been embroiled in numerous legal troubles and subsequent disbarment. Defiant to the end, Myers opted for the hard way, firmly believing she had a justifiable reason for doing so. In her mind, by refusing the test, she hoped to exploit a legal loophole. However, her plan backfired spectacularly as she found herself swiftly handcuffed and placed under arrest. Throughout the journey to the county jail, Myers incessantly reminded Officer Rankin and his colleague, Katie, of her own status as a police officer, demanding special treatment befitting her perceived privilege. To her dismay, Myers soon realized that her expectations of preferential treatment were unfounded. Her attitude, once haughty and dismissive, transformed completely when faced with the harsh reality of her situation. Subsequently, Myers found herself standing before a judge in a courtroom where her fate would be decided. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and she was ultimately found guilty of being unable to maintain reasonable control while under the influence. She was slapped with a fine as a consequence of her actions. Certainly, it was truly disheartening to witness a female police officer engaging in unlawful behavior. However, brace yourself for what comes next, as it's guaranteed to fill you with rage. And be sure not to miss the ending. Ronnie Karosha. Once upon a time in Tulsa, an incident unfolded that left the entire community in shock. The Tulsa Police Department, known for their dedication to serving and protecting, found themselves facing an unprecedented situation. It all began when an off-duty police officer had an unexpected mental breakdown, setting off a chain of events that would leave an indelible mark on the city. In the midst of this turmoil, a 70-year-old woman named LaDonna Paris found herself at the center of the chaos. Seeking solace, she sought refuge in a Habitat for Humanity restore and locked herself in the restroom for what would turn out to be a 4-hour ordeal. Concerned employees desperately attempted to coax her out, but their efforts were in vain. Complicating matters further, Paris's loyal canine companion was trapped in a U-Haul, deprived of fresh air. The distressing news reached the ears of the police, who swiftly arrived at the scene. The Restore employees informed the officers of their desire for Paris to leave, firmly declaring that she would no longer be welcome in their establishment. Yet Paris remained resolute, refusing to open the door despite repeated pleas from the authorities. As the tensions escalated, the officers tried to reason with Paris, who insisted that she would only comply if the store manager requested her departure. To prove her point, she even conversed with the manager over the phone, dismissing the officers' claim that they were speaking to the true authority figure. The situation had reached an impasse. Impatience began to creep into the hearts of the officers, particularly Officer Ronnie Karosha, a fearless woman who refused to accept defeat. Hours ticked by, but Paris showed no signs of emerging from her sanctuary. Ronnie, unable to contain her frustration, resorted to pounding on the door. In an attempt to intimidate Paris, she flicked her taser on and off, warning that unless she complied, she would face the consequences. Unexpectedly, Paris's apprehension at the sight of the taser led Ronnie to burst into laughter. "This is going to be fun," she exclaimed, her voice echoing through the restroom. To compound the matter, Ronnie continuously referenced SO 85, the code used by the Tulsa police to signify a person in mental distress. In their own misguided way, the officers found humor in Paris's struggles. As the officers ridiculed Paris's fragile mental state, their attention was drawn to a startling revelation. Paris possessed a lighter and an aerosol can, which she repeatedly discharged within the confines of the restroom. This display of defiance left the officers no choice but to summon additional backup. Determined to bring an end to the standoff, they decided to forcefully enter the bathroom and apprehend Paris. Chaos ensued as the officers swiftly descended upon her. In the scuffle, Paris suffered a painful injury to her face as she collided with the unforgiving bathroom floor. Handcuffed and subdued, she was escorted outside by Ronnie, her freedom now a distant memory. However, fate had another twist in store. As the officers finally paid attention to the surroundings, they noticed Paris's loyal companion, her dog, locked inside a stifling car for over 4 agonizing hours. Recognizing the urgency, they quickly retrieved the car keys and released the suffering animal from its captive confines. Ronnie, seizing the opportunity, threatened Paris with surrendering her beloved pet to the local animal shelter, a cruel blow in an already distressing situation. Medical assistance was urgently sought. The EMSA arrived on the scene. They quickly determined that Paris's erratic behavior stemmed from her bipolar disorder, which had plunged her into a manic episode. Despite this revelation, Ronnie, perhaps blinded by the heat of the moment, opted to proceed with arresting Paris, levying numerous charges against her. Paris languished in jail for an entire month, her life turned upside down by an ordeal that seemed never-ending. However, justice finally prevailed when a judge dismissed all charges against her, recognizing the disproportionate handling of the situation. The truth had come to light, and Paris's innocence was reaffirmed. Once the body camera footage of Paris's arrest was made public by the Tulsa Police Department, an outpouring of public anger ensued. The community could not fathom the unprofessional banter exchanged between the officers while the suspects suffered in their custody. In the wake of mounting criticism, a lawsuit was filed against Officer Ronnie Karosha, signaling the beginning of a long legal battle. In response to the public outcry, the Tulsa Police Department issued a statement addressing Paris's arrest, while acknowledging the unprofessionalism displayed by the officers during their private conversations. They maintained that the overall handling of the call adhered to the department's policies. However, the fate of Ronnie's case remains uncertain, as the public eagerly awaits updates on its progress.